Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of
Not Fighting.
And we're back after episode 50. We had to take kind of a small break, so we're sorry, everybody.
Yeah, we've been busy.
That's like the only way to put it. We had our anniversary in there. I had family in town. It's the summer in San Diego, and usually means visitors.
We need the beach.
Yeah.
No.
And it's been really nice in San Diego here recently. The water was like the warmest it's been since we've lived here. I feel
San Diego's so bad most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we get really thin skin, I feel like. When my parents were here, I kept talking about how, I'm sorry, it's so hot and humid, and I could just feel them, like, their eyes rolling.
Yes.
And so, podcast listeners, because I've gotten a lot of feedback on this since we did the episode. I can't remember. It was a couple episodes back. We talked a little bit about Space Jam 2. If you can see this.
He's wearing a Space Jam shirt.
Yeah. So, for those that are watching on YouTube, I am donning a Space Jam 2. I think it's called the New Legacy. I was going to call it the Next Generation.
Same.
Yeah. But we watched it. So
we did.
Before we get into it,
and despite what the promo, the trailer said, like, LeBron is LeBron, and that's a big part of it. Yeah,
it's a huge part of it. And honestly, like, I feel like that was a blind spot. I heard that this movie cost like $250 million to make. $250 million. You're going to drop a trailer where it's not obvious that LeBron James is LeBron James in the movie?
Maybe we're just reading into it too much. I don't know.
I feel like, there's probably multiple trailers, but yeah, anyways, let's get into it because I got a lot of feedback on that episode. And then on my IG story, there was a lot of feedback on I live storied, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd say live tweeted, but they weren't tweets. I just posted on my story my take on the movies
as we watched it. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people basically were like, it was, I would say, more of a negative slant, but it was more, I felt like, satirizing my take on the film. And so a lot of people were like, should I watch it? And first, I guess, let's start with you. Like, should somebody watch Space Jam 2?
Yeah. It wasn't bad. I think there's a couple things. Like, I think my biggest takeaway from the movie is I can't believe LeBron James agreed to that script.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, there's so many little digs at him throughout the entire movie, which is like, I don't know, they kind of just make fun of him in so many ways. And I'm like, and it's not in the way of like, it's good to like make fun of yourself and like that kind of thing. It's like, no, they're like slights, like real digs, not just like, which I was like, dang, I can't believe he allowed that. Especially because he's kind of sensitive about all that stuff, right? Like,
yeah, in the past, I think, he was even criticized because when they were doing a debate about who's the greatest, him or Michael Jordan, in an interview, he was like, well, I'm the greatest. He's like, I think it's fair to like for me to say that or whatever. And everybody's like, anybody can say it but you, dude. Like,
yes.
He doesn't seem to have a really great like feel for how to handle just sort of that, like, that I guess public perception.
Yeah. I think, one of the worst parts in the whole thing is that, like, they have to make it dramatic. So the Toon Squad is like losing the basketball game, and at halftime, spoiler alert, but it's like at halftime, they're like, we got Michael Jordan, and like everybody's like, yay, cheering, like he's gonna save us, because like
even
obviously
LeBron is like, good, Michael's here, he'll fix this. I can't be trusted.
And then it turns out it's Michael B. Jordan, so not the same, but at the same time, and like they're like, ah, and then like all defeated again. It's like, you have LeBron James. Like, if it was the original Space Jam and they had Michael Jordan on their team, like he wouldn't have like needed somebody else to be on the team. Like, he can carry them.
Yeah, and
he never needed anyone else.
In the original Space Jam, Michael's like, let's figure this out. Like, how do I got to figure out how to play basketball in the cartoon world so I can dominate like I do in the real world? And this one, LeBron's like, anybody else got any ideas? Because, like, I'm trash today, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna. I won't go too much more into detail, but
in the original, I really enjoyed the fact that like Michael Jordan was still a real person inside of like a cartoon thing the whole time. You know, where they like made LeBron a cartoon. I feel like that was like, I didn't love it because I also didn't think they did a good job of like how he looked as a cartoon. It doesn't really look like LeBron in my opinion. They got the face shape wrong.
No, I feel like it low-key, I feel like it was racist, but
no, it wasn't.
It'd be really bad if they did like one of those like old-timey like characters
and then
something.
They made it where they weren't cartoons, they were like
3D animated.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just that doesn't work.
I also feel like the Looney Tunes weren't really that big of a part. Like, they didn't have that big of a role at all in general.
They weren't very loony.
No, it wasn't like loony. Like that was like what made Space Jam like good is like the Looney Tunes. Like you like as a child, I'm like, we loved Looney Tunes, like watching those cartoons. Like, and then they were in this movie, and it was like kind of like meshing like some of all your favorite things as a kid, like Michael Jordan and like Bulls basketball, like that kind of thing. Versus and then like these cartoons, but the Looney Tunes didn't have like a big enough role in my opinion.
Yeah, and
I don't know how to explain.
I feel like they didn't really play into it very much either. Where it's like, you know, these are the personas of the Looney Tunes, and I get it today that kids might not be as into it, but like Time Warner or Warner Brothers, which this is a big part of the film. This is a Warner Brothers movie.
Brothers.
Anyways, the thing is like they have like rights to other franchises. You could roll those things in as well, and I just felt like they sort of undersold a lot of their different franchises in that. But the thing that is actually frustrating about that is that the whole thing, without going into too much detail, in case you do want to watch the movie and haven't seen it, is that the Warner Brothers like are like
this is a techie take on it.
Yeah, well, like the algorithm, quote unquote, is kind of the bad guy. Like their
algae rhythm.
Yeah,
right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so. God, that's bad. Man, I can see like a high school kid writing this as a screenplay, which that might have been the case.
Probably been better.
Yeah, but he was like the bad guy. Their algorithm for like recommendations, which is I feel like a dig at Netflix, where they're like the most powerful algorithm ever, and at the end they're just kind of like, yeah, maybe we don't need an algorithm or whatever. And I feel like it's Warner Brothers just being like, hey. Yeah, you know how Netflix like recommends stuff? Yeah, just that's bad. Don't do that. I feel like it's low-key they just couldn't build a good algorithm for recommendations.
Yeah, but didn't you say that there was like a more tech specific thing? It was something about the algorithm. It's not actually an algorithm what they're talking about.
Yeah. So that's the thing that I think is funny about it is like
I feel like you're like one of the very few people that actually understand that. But
I without making everybody in the podcast basically just turn this thing off. An algorithm is something written by a human. It can be really complex, but machine learning is what Netflix and YouTube and everybody else use for recommendation engines. And essentially machine learning uses machines to write the algorithm, so it figures out what people are doing and figures out what variables are important and then writes an algorithm to support like an end goal, like what will people watch the most. An algorithm is a person writing something that they think will produce the same result, but people are not as good at machines at writing algorithms. Yeah, that's
no. You just confused me because you said like an algorithm is something that a person writes, whatever. But then, like you said, machines write algorithms too. So how can it be?
Well,
that can't
when
be
a
the
machine writes
definition.
an algorithm, it's what you would refer to as AI or machine learning.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
But if you talk about just they could have been talking about that.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of.
I feel like you really just wanted to hate on this movie so bad that you're gonna you're gonna nitpick everything, and that's what your Instagram story did do.
Well, I work in a field where we deal with AI, and one of the things that drives me crazy is whenever people conflate these things, because every marketer on the planet is like, we use AI, but they don't. They use algorithms, which is fine. Algorithms are good, but the truth is like there's a big difference between machine learning and algorithms.
Okay. there's a difference, and I believe you.
And I feel like Warner Brothers has perpetuated this because it's in their favor.
Well, because they think people are stupid. They're not going to understand the difference. And most people, we don't know.
We don't know the difference. And Warner Brothers definitely doesn't.
Thanks for enlightening us.
Now, as much as we've kind of like panned Space Jam 2, and I know that that's not why people listen to this podcast. And so for those of you...
But I do feel like you want our hot take on it.
Yeah, you do. I feel like for those of you that are like, I could care less about this, we're about done. But I do want to say this, because I will give a kudos in that they made a new movie. And we were talking, I think we talked a few podcasts back about watching Coming to America 2. And it's like, all you did was just like have a reunion show.
It was like a remake, but like they tried to do the same like old jokes, but it doesn't work the same because it's like, we've already seen it. We don't need... It wasn't like a throwback. It was like just recreating the same movie. So you just remade it with the same people, but now they're just older.
Yeah. I feel like it's like, you know, all those notes from the first one that everybody enjoyed. We're going to make sure we hit those because you're stupid and that's what you like.
Yeah.
And gosh, dang it. I hate to say it, but I think that's people.
It's true. Yeah. But
not listeners of this podcast. God, no.
It is a different movie than the first one. So like an actual news story.
Yeah.
But it was good.
And I like Michael Jordan better than LeBron James. And I feel like LeBron James kind of comes off looking a little bit like...
Very weak.
Yeah. Like a very weak, meager... Like, there's no doubt in my mind that Michael Jordan is greater than LeBron James after Space Jam 2.
And also, like, he doesn't come across as a good father.
That's to me, that's the most bothersome part, is I feel like... am I crazy in that... In the beginning,
by everything I've seen, he seems like a pretty decent father. So,
well, here's my argument. My argument is that at the beginning they paint him as a bad dad, and then at the end it's like he's redeemed. Now he's a good dad. I would say he became a worse dad throughout the movie. He was right on point at the beginning.
Anyhow, if you are watching this, despite all the makeup that I put on and tried to cover it up. You probably can notice that like one eye is a little squinty because it's swollen.
Yeah.
And it's black.
Yeah. And
real black.
That's one of the I guess not casualties, not the right word. I guess it's one of the risks of training MMA, especially when you're getting ready for a
fight. I have a fight finally. We've been talking about it forever. And August 27th, I will be fighting for LFA in St. Louis, Missouri, which my hometown. So dope.
I like how we were able to sync up there.
I know.
Hashtag same brain. But the thing that I think is interesting about it is that they didn't really even know that was going to be that was your hometown when they booked you for this fight.
I know. So cool.
Yeah. So she'll be returning home on August 27th to face off against, I don't know.
Helen.
Yeah.
Lucero?
Yeah. I think that's the name. But irregardless, we're just happy you've got a fight. We've been saying,
finally. Hopefully
we'll have an announcement soon. And I think on the last podcast, this is something that did we know about this in the last one?
I don't think so.
The thing is it's been really hard for you to get a fight. And I know that's been discouraging to you to a certain extent, where it's like you've been putting in a lot of work. And over the last year, you've almost been training for a full year now. Just strictly MMA. We were talking the other day. You've put a gi on maybe twice this entire year.
Yeah, I mean, I put it on to teach, but not to train.
Yeah, and I think that's something that not a lot of MMA athletes that transition from jiu-jitsu do. Like, there's a lot of people right now that are fighting MMA, but I don't know that they're doing. I think they've supplemented their training with like a couple days a week of maybe extra nogi or MMA or stand up or something, but you went full-fledged to where that's the only thing that you're training. Yeah, I am. I'm training like a professional. You are, and I'm really excited to see the first fight. And I know a lot of I'm just like fingers crossed and like staying like hopeful that we make it. I'm 4 weeks out right now, and so hopefully everything goes well and I get all the way to the fight with everything working out healthy. Like, nobody goes into anything 100% healthy. That's just the part of training is the wear and tear on your body. But I've had like several like teammates or, people I know here recently that have been scheduled to fight and like
they've had like weird injuries that they've had to pull out of fights from injuries. And
we had a friend yesterday. They didn't give him medical clearance because his heart rate was too high.
Weighed in, everything. And then, so it's just, praying and hoping that everything goes well and we get to that day and I get to get in the cage finally.
And for those that are listening and are like, how can I watch the fight? It'll be on UFC Fight Pass, LFA.
Should be, unless I'm on the prelims. I think
I think they broadcast the whole thing live. I don't know if they show the
It's either on Facebook or I think it's on their Facebook or on the Fight Pass.
They will be broadcasting it through one of those mechanisms, so you'll be able to catch it. And if you're in St. Louis, come on out, get some tickets.
Yeah. We don't have information on tickets yet, but I will have that soon. And maybe by the time we record this or put it out, I'll have the information for you guys.
Yeah. Once we do, we'll drop it in the link in the YouTube description as well. So even if you're listening to this and it's not there yet, we'll put it there once we have it. But I think it's interesting, one of the things you brought up, which is, we've had a lot of people have to pull out of fights or have fight canceled on them. And, fighting is really a slog, it's like there's that meme where it's like what my parents think I do, what my friends think I do, what I actually do. Actually, fighting is very unglamorous in my opinion. But I think saying that you're a fighter, I think is perceived as being very glamorous. And I think that that's why there's very few actually real fighters out there.
But I think that goes, it's not just like fighting, like MMA fighting. I think that goes across the board in like a lot of like combat sports in general. People love to say that they're like this and that. Like how many like memes are there about like just the like white belts, like, walking around like trying to tell everybody that they do this and that, or like you're in CrossFit. It's like if you'll know because somebody will tell you within like the first 10 seconds. It's like everybody, there's levels to this game,
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people pretending, but that goes across the board. That's without saying, there's a ton of people that pretend to be real or want to be, but like when it comes down to it, they don't actually want to fight. They don't actually want to put themselves out there, challenge themselves, or like,
Yeah, well, I think...
And I don't want to talk too much because I haven't actually got to step in the ring yet, or in the cage yet, so I'm like, I'm not trying to be whatever, but...
But you've been competing in jiu-jitsu for 15 years, and I think one of the things, you see it even in jiu-jitsu, a lot of people, I think it's a mixture of two things. One is... people love to train. Training is fun.
Yes.
Like, it's why jiu-jitsu is popular. Like, most people listen to this podcast train some kind of martial art, and if not, you probably know somebody that does, and they probably love it. Are they a serious competitor? Probably not. And if they are, and this is the big one for me, is like, if they are, they spend a lot of time training and taking it seriously, and other people take the training seriously, yet there's very little actual validation, meaning, you go to a tournament, you enter your weight division and class and stuff, and at the end you get a medal. And even if you get paid, it's sort of like you're not paid very much. And the reason is because it's not a valuable accomplishment to anyone other than you, largely.
Yeah.
And our good friend of the show, Nick Schrock, I remember after one of the worst tournaments I'd ever competed in, he told me, he's like, well, don't worry because no one else cares. Yeah. And I was like, whatever. And he's like, no, look around. Like, no one else here cares. No one else even watched it. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right, man. And that's the slog of fighting.
Yeah.
And that's where I think people lie to themselves.
One of the coaches that was there for my sparring yesterday was talking about too, and he said to me, we were talking about an incident that had happened with a female fighter getting injured by me, and it's like just having, when we talked about like the ego to tap, like not like training smart and like taking care of yourself, and just having too much ego because you just can't afford losing any round I guess your ego can't handle losing a round in sparring or training. And it's like, he's like, it's practice. This is the time that you make those mistakes. This is the time you tap and you move on to the next thing. And it's like, he said, I don't remember who won in practice 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. That's practice. Like, you're going to remember, like, oh, they needed to work on these things, or like as a coach, like, but I'm not keeping track of points and like that in practice. So that's something I think people get twisted a lot. And it is hard for me. Like, I had some really good moments yesterday in practice and some really bad moments. And the bad moments are the ones that stick with you, because I'm like, I hate those moments because I should be better. You know, it's like I'm so hard on myself where I'm like, it's hard for me to let go because I'm not like when you're in those situations, the only person you can blame is yourself, because it's you and one other person out there. And like, if you're not performing, like, or if you made a mistake, it's like, it's on you. And so I take that really poorly sometimes, because it's really hard to get over that. But looking at it, trying, and this is something that I'm just trying to tell myself right now and trying to convince myself of, is that it's good for me to have those moments in practice, because it prepares you for what's going to happen when you actually get to the competition.
Yeah, and I think, that's something I've said forever, and I don't think I'm probably unique or the first person to say it, but usually whenever I would have one of those types of days, and I don't have them the same way that you do, I'm not a competitor in the same way that you are. No. I am, but I'm also like, it's not in my DNA. Like, you have a rare type of like that Michael Jordan style of like, I'm gonna slash your tires when you leave because I'm so competitive type of drive inside of you.
Which I've never done that before, no. By the way.
No, she's very friendly. It's just internalized. But the thing is like, usually whenever you have one of those days where you feel like everything is good, but then, like somebody catches you in a submission, or somebody that you feel like shouldn't be able to like have a good round against you or something does. And when you leave and it just bothers you, usually that day is a bad day. And it's usually followed not shortly by a day that you would say is like, I'm the best I've ever been. And it's because of that bad day to where you tighten everything up just a little bit, because it bothers you to make those mistakes, to where it's like a light goes off in your brain the second you sort of like analyze something that's happening and be like, this is where everything went wrong last time, and you won't allow it. Yeah.
It's hard to get over those moments, but the thing that's bothering me the most right now, though, is like, I wanted to get it back yesterday, but like, it wasn't the right time for me to do that. And then I have to wait like 2 weeks to spar again, because I'm going to be gone next week in Houston. I'm going to help get some friends ready for their fight in Houston. And then I have like a whole other week before. So it's like 2 weeks before I get to spar again. And I'm like, I just want to do it right now. Can we just go? I just wanted give me, I wish we could have done it today.
Well, see, that's my point, is I think that in fighting, that is the unglamorous part, where it's like you have to be able to stick with a lot of those ups and downs over the long term. And I think a lot of people lie to themselves, where they make excuses for why they hide from those experiences. And when they do happen, it's like they don't say to themselves, like, I want to get that back. That's hard. You have to do that a lot. Like, that experience is not unique. That's happened like tons and tons of times over the course of training. But it's when somebody goes, instead of saying, I want to get that back, they say, well, I'm not going to go spar there anymore. Or I'm not going to train with the guy that, submitted me from the back that I didn't feel like should have been able to get that submission, or something like that. And, we've seen that recently with fighters that we know, where it's like, no one goes into a fight 100% healthy. And this isn't pointed at anyone in particular or anything, but I do think that there is something where, if you're a fighter and you feel like you're good and everybody around you says you're good, and then you're like, well, I have an excuse now to maybe not do this fight, or maybe an excuse to like not expose myself. And then you take those opportunities over and over again. You start to see a pattern where it's like, this is a person whose ego is afraid to like lose, to actually put themselves out there, because they've invested so much into it. And that's where I think a lot of people...
Well, that's what, like, I think we had, you know, one of my old coaches would always, like, be like, oh, you always want the hardest fights. And I'm like, yeah, because if I'm going to compete, like, I really want to challenge myself. That was, like, especially in jiu-jitsu, I've been doing it for so long, you know, being a black belt. Like, I don't want to just go out there and I'm going to fight on fight to wins or whatever with, like, against somebody that's just, like, you know, an easy opponent. Like, I want the hardest opponents. I want to compete against the best, because how do you give yourself that, like, how do you prove to yourself that you're that good if you're only fighting people who you know aren't at the top of the game?
Yeah.
So that's, like, something that bothers me about, and, like, that I was like, well, what else would I do? That irritated me when he said that. Like, it was like a flaw of mine, because I'm like, no, like, I don't want the easy fights. Like, I want the ones that are going to challenge me, because if I'm not being challenged, it's not fun. That's why it's been so much fun to do, like, change lanes and do some more MMA. Not that jiu-jitsu isn't challenging still for me, and it is, but I just kind of, like, come to know what to expect. So it's like a whole new world to where I'm learning, and I get to challenge myself in a very different way.
And I think, you know, this is where there's a divergence between the two of us, because with you, your goal is to be the best. Mm-hmm. The best.
But why are you competing if that's not your goal?
Exactly. And that's my point. And that's largely, like, people are always asking me now, like, oh, are you going to compete again or whatever? And it's like, I might for fun, you know, like, right now, the biggest thing is like, competition makes you improve, because you actually have to work on different stuff. So it's like, I would compete just for the aspect of, like, improving, because I don't like having my skills atrophy over time. But realistically, it's like, I realized a while back, like, I'm not going to be the best in the world. It's just not going to be the case for a lot of different reasons.
Well, I think that's something that is kind of funny that you say that, because I think you have the ability to be. You just don't put it together in competition. The same way that you could in the academy. Well, but your focus is, like, split.
Yeah, and that's a part of it, right? Like, and my body's starting to fail me a little bit more than it used to. But the last time I competed, I felt like I competed well. I finally competed, like, to the best of my ability, and I kind of figured out all the little things that I felt like had kept me from being, like, made me come up short in the past. Yeah. And I was just really happy with that being maybe the last time that I ever competed, you know? Mm-hmm. And it probably won't be, but if it is, I'm totally satisfied with that. But there are different things in my life that are not martial arts related where I'm like, I think I can be the best at this, or whatever this pursuit is I think I can take this farther than anybody can. And because of that, like, I'm all in. But I think there's a lot of people that say to themselves, yeah, I want to be the best, but they know deep down they're not gonna be, or they don't, even if they could be, they don't actually believe they can be. Yeah,
I think that's true. And I think, well, we were talking about it, like, you know, the difference between people, like, pulling out of fights and looking for excuses and not have to fight because their ego can't take it, or taking the easy fights. And that's something I think people are kind of accusing, like, the negative comments are accusing, like, Simone Biles of, like, this year with, like, the Olympics. But I think in her instance, it's so different, because it's not ego. She's not afraid to do it. She's done it a million times. It's not a fear of, like, failure. It's like, it's going out there, competing, knowing that your body isn't, like, your mind and your body aren't working together. And in a sport like fighting, like gymnastics, is like, it's super dangerous to go out there and not be, like, it's not even 100%. It's just, like, in sync, in tune with your body. Like, there's days that you have off days, but if you have an off day when you're doing, like, a million flips through the air and you, like, land wrong, you injure yourself, you hurt yourself to where, like, you could end your career. You could do so many there's, like, so much risk in that. And then the same thing, like, I think, you know, like, my scores, my numbers aren't going to be good helping. They're not going to help my team right now. So me just selfishly wanting to stay in for the sake of, like, that's what's expected of me doesn't help the team. Yeah. In the way that, like, me saying, like, having a real moment with myself, saying, like, I just don't have it right now, is very different than just quitting because your ego can't handle the loss.
Yeah, totally. You know, I can think of a time whenever you and I went and competed in New York, and there was a really tough situation from a family perspective where we were dealing with a family member that was going through cancer treatment. And anyways, long story short, we were both just kind of like getting ready to compete that day. And we were in the worst mindset, just like we didn't want to be there. We wanted to be home with family. And it was obvious right before we both competed that like we'd rather do anything else that day. And we both competed terribly.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking then at the time like, like that's just as bad as being like severely injured. And so that's where I do give her a little bit of a pass in the kind of like you were saying, where it's like when you know that you can't be the best, that's the sign of a true competitor, where it's like I'm not competitive right now. I don't even want to do it. If I'm not going to be the best, like what's the point?
But it's not quitting. It's like
no.
Especially in a scenario where it's like your scores are affecting your team. Like, why not give somebody else a chance? Because they might, like, you're with all Olympians. They're all really, really good. So, like, give somebody else an opportunity to step up and, like, you know, fill your shoes.
And I feel like with martial arts, it's kind of one of those things, too, where it's like, definitely don't get in there. I mean, MMA, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, definitely don't get in there if you're like, today, I can't fight. Not because you're scared, because you're nervous or whatever. Like, I think that's really normal. Whenever you're like, I don't want to do this, like I've got other things going on that are more important to me or whatever, and when I get in there, I'm not going to be thinking about fighting, you can get really hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, you can, I mean, yeah, it's dangerous. Like stepping in there healthy and in good, you know, good mental and physical condition, it's dangerous. So like if you're not really committed and you're good in there, like you can really harm yourself. Which,
how many freaking terrible like freak injuries have we seen recently? Conor McGregor's like ankle breaking in half, and Jacare getting his arm snapped, and the Chris Weidman like shin break. It's like I feel like before this past year,
it's the vaccine. No, I'm just joking.
No, you can count.
I'm just joking. I'm not that way.
And now we're not on YouTube anymore.
I'm completely joking.
No, but like, you know, you think about it, it's like before this year, you could kind of count on one hand how many injuries like that you knew about in MMA, and you could almost reference a fight. And now it's like almost every other card, there's something crazy like this, you know?
Yeah.
Remember that there was another fight, I can't remember what it was, but the guy armbarred the guy, and he was trying to tap in a triangle.
Oh,
and
yes.
He was trying to tap, and the referee didn't see it, and the guy's arm, like, luckily, I think it just dislocated. It didn't break. But, like...
It's nasty.
There's just so much of that, and it's like, I would... You know, you were like, what's going on? Like, why? There's got to be a reason
Something
for this.
in the water right now.
I honestly think it's just that martial arts has evolved so much now that everyone is developing these skills that are so effective that, like, the smallest error could mean, like, yeah, broken arm, broken leg, completely unconscious. Like, you know, and before, maybe it's competitive even at a similar skill level because you can kind of counter each other, but now with martial arts as effective as it is, you can just surgically boom right there. Like, it's dangerous.
Yes it is.
And that's where we'll leave it today. But we want to thank everybody for watching or listening to the podcast, and sorry for a little bit of a break, but we're back on it now. Episode 51, halfway to a century.
Yeah, I mean, not a century.
Not a century doing this podcast.
Time.
I mean, if we did this podcast for a century, it'd be really impressive.
It would be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we'll be long dead before that happens, but...
speak for yourself. All right, well, we want to thank everybody for watching and listening. Another episode of...
Not Fighting.